Is it on?
Yep, it's recording right now. Hello all, and welcome to Chronicle Thread. We post our podcast every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, so be on the lookout. Thanks for watching and happy writing.
Welcome to another podcast of Chronicle Thread. I'm Shawn Stanley.
I'm Ethan Stanley.
And today we wanted to talk a little bit about characters, developing characters.
Describing characters.
Developing and describing them, because an author will start describing these characters in his mind. He's going to see them how they are. He's going to see how they act more than anybody else, because they're going to be playing these scenes over and over and over in his mind. He's going to see exactly what type of people they are and can develop all the nuances. The problem is letting everyone else see the same thing.
Yeah. And so me and Shawn seem to have different ends of the spectrum where I've read a lot of his stuff, and he doesn't do much at all. Doesn't describe the people at all. Whereas I can go overly over the top into detail about what a person looks like, and I have to tone it down because that's not needed at the beginning.
It's a hard balance, because for me, I feel like the reader wants a story to go on. You can tell detail, but only enough for them to just kind of make their own picture in their mind, and the story needs to go on. If I start talking about the little flowers on the wallpaper detail, that to me I would just get lost. I would go, can we just get on with the story? I can picture my own wallpaper. If you want, just tell me it's flowery wallpaper and move on. But as far as characters go, you need to see what the author is seeing.
It's funny that you're saying that.
Yeah. Well, I would listen to what Ethan's critiquing when I'm writing. All of a sudden, I start talking about this guy pulling on his beard, and he goes, "Wait, he has a beard? Well, of course he has a beard." Well, you never said he had a beard, but all along, my mind, he had a beard.
Yeah. I think in one of in Shawn's works that we're going to talk a bit more about today, the only description that, apart from someone tugging on their beard, that he gives of anybody is one woman, and is that she has, I think, curly brown hair. Mm-hmm. That's it. That is the only describing factor that he gives everybody. He doesn't talk about their clothes. He doesn't talk about their hair or nothing. Just nothing at all. And so I like to, I mean, of course I put, images and faces of these people, but I basically just grabbed from like movies and other just images that I've seen around from movies or TV shows into these characters, because I had nothing else really to go on. And it was all right, but for me, I wanted to. It was also because I wanted to like slow down a little bit and like gestate these characters, because of how you wrote it. It goes on very fast. The chapters are very quick, and you move through the story at a rather fast pace. Like, I think if I sat down and just read it, I could be done in maybe 3 hours.
Yeah, it's a short read. It's only the book that I wrote is called A Man Whose Name Was Joseph. I took the nativity story, but I'm telling it through Joseph's perspective. What was Joseph dealing with? And the whole world,
as a prospective father, as a fiance, as someone who at the early stages kind of bought into the fears of Mary cheating on him, and the torture and the decision making of putting her away privately, which is divorcing her quietly, what that means, and all that stuff.
Yeah, and then you also have the Roman rule. You have King Herod. All these things going on, but the world really knows nothing about Joseph.
Yeah.
And so making this whole perspective up, I'm having to kind of go, what would it be like for you to go home and tell your parents, hey, my fiance, she's pregnant, but it's okay. It's a holy child, and we're still gonna be able to get married. It's gonna be great.
In a culture that women who get pregnant out of wedlock
Stoned.
are stoned. Not today's where it's like, oh, you got your girlfriend pregnant. Like, oh, okay. It's, oh, she's pregnant. I guess she has to die now.
Yeah.
Like, saying that alone is.
So I really really liked looking at it from his perspective. I really saw a strength in this character that, and I built in this conflict of him wanting to be with Mary, but knowing that the child she was carrying, it wasn't his, and that who he was, and that he would never have that blood bond in a culture where that is so important. So I built in this conflict, but what I didn't describe, I think in the first chapter I said that he was taller than most. I said large in stature, which really doesn't mean anything.
It's been a while since I've read it, but yeah.
Um, but other than that, I just picture him as a Jewish man with a beard, taller than most, um, and a very very devout follower of the law of Moses. Very cool character to have to navigate through all of these cultural taboos and still make it.
But you have to, in terms of describing, what does your average, you know,
Right.
0 BC Jew look like? Are we talking large nose and super curly hair? Are we talking like what we see nowadays with Orthodox Jews and
Well,
ancestors?
no,
Are we talking?
Um, it's hard for me to picture exactly, but you see the movies of Christ. When they play those types of movies, you see with the robes and the head coverings. Um, I think of that type of look. I do think of him with dark hair. I do think of him as slim, fit, maybe with a little larger nose. I kind of picture him a little bit, not gangly, but not, wow, he's a hunk, super attractive guy. Because that just didn't just fit his character.
So me with more muscle.
Sure, there you go.
I'm kind of gangly.
So that's kind of how I picture him. The beard, I mean, beards back then, they weren't formed or shaped. They were not super really clean cut, but they had beards. Joseph's father has a salt and pepper beard. I made that in there. And he wears black and white clothes. I put that in there. His wife wears more colorful clothes.
Yeah, but you hardly see them through the whole story. It's weird that you described them instead of the main characters.
I did describe them a lot more. So I don't know. That's where my dilemma is as an author, is how much detail does the reader want, and do I just say at the beginning and let them picture the rest of the way through, or do I keep building as I go? So within chapter 3 or 4, you got this good picture, but the story's still continuing, and I'm not drowning you in minute details of facial features or fingernails or anything like that.
I think just giving a rough approximation of their face, no, or you don't have to describe nose size, but basically, I think describing things that stand out. If their nose is average, I think not saying anything about the nose is fine. But if their hair, especially, saying the color of their eyes, I think is good. But I think there are powerful ways to say, like when I write third person, I write third. It's not first person, but I have the quote unquote camera following a specific person, and even though it's third person, everything they see is still going to be in somewhat their perspective, kind of their thought process. And so, what I mean by that is, someone looking up to a sunset and the clouds are trailing kind of as like fingers raking. If the person feels trapped, I might describe that the clouds look like fingernail scratching in wood as someone's being dragged or something. But if someone is more, if it was some herbalist or some person who's really into the garden, maybe they might describe it more like roots reaching for the sun, like that they've been describing. So in terms of if, but I don't think you write currently like this. You write third person as the camera's far away and things are just playing out, I think.
Things are playing out. I do get some type of, I can't remember what the term is, but I get into their conversations, and I like when there's this big conflict and there's conversations um, that play out, and I try to keep those action type moments very live, short of detail, but live in emotion, live in action. Now, I like to describe emotion through facial features and things like that, so you can feel the emotion that the character's feeling. But at the same time, I want to make sure that the reader is engaged and continuing to go on with the story and things, not get bogged down by too much cinematic description.
Well, the description, how someone looks can be important to someone. Like I was saying, kind of keeping from one person's perspective, seeing, just looking at someone, they may just be brown hair, blue clothes, sandals, or whatever. But when they get close, then they're able to see their crystalline sapphire eyes, and that kind of seem like, oh, I never noticed the color of your eyes before. Like, wow, they're really pretty. And then once they get close, they get drawn to them.
Yeah, but let's
like
say
that can be important, and that could change a conversation.
So you can describe their hair and their eyes, but I mean, you get into they have high cheekbones or a longer chin or very thick neck. I mean, do you go through those types of details, or is it just describing the eyes and crimson lips, those types of things?
You could, describe it all, but I think it's best. I mean, it depends on if your book has a character like this, but if you have a character that is very attuned to details, if you have like a private eye, or you have someone who does that, and
Joseph would be one that was prone to detail.
Because he's a carpenter and all that.
Well, he's a carpenter for one, and a very devout follower of the law of Moses, which is very, very intricate.
Yeah, very intricate in the details and stuff. Yeah. So, from his perspective, he might notice those things, and he might pick them out. And the larger neck, eye, crimson lips and stuff. But it doesn't mean you have to. Just because it is allowed doesn't mean you have to as a writer. I mean, technically, you could keep what you have written, and no one could really say the other, otherwise. But
you bring up a good point. The character himself would be very prone to detail.
Yeah.
Therefore, I should make sure the reader understands that he's very prone to detail by showing detail.
Yeah. If he's the one kind of picking out details, then you get that side of his character.
And I don't get drawn into all the description.
Yeah, it becomes character building at that point.
So that to me makes more sense, instead of just stopping the story and going through description so you can see what the room looks like.
Yeah. And so it was brought in by the guards. All the guards were wearing brass tacks on their leather. What are the Roman the quilt the kilt things that they wear?
I don't remember what.
The brass tacks and the straps on the helmets of one of the guards looked very worn. He's probably probably not that. You don't need to pause the scene, but noting of the armor, you could just say one is scratched and battle worn. He's the fighter. He's older. Like you don't have to go into too much detail, but you can have generalistic
You could say
things.
like the battle worn leather straps on the helmet kept waving back and forth as he limped, or something,
You could do that,
so they can see it as well as feel it.
but it would also be important to say that you should only include those details if you're going to use them. Like if,
Mm.
let's say, you know, this person is getting arrested and you note all this, but nothing happens with the guards, then people are going to be like, well, who are these guards? Why are they described? Why are they important? But if a fight scene was about to break out, then, you know, maybe the person would go after the battle one person, knock him down, turn to the novice, the brand new soldier, and just point his sword and say, put that down, and then they're going to be like, okay, you know. Then you have him take down the veteran in front of the newbie, and then the guy's like, okay, like, that makes sense to detail it that way. But if the guy's just going to be brought into a room by these guards, be talked to, and then brought out, I don't. Saying any more than Roman guard, I think, is too much.
Yeah, and so I guess what we're kind of agreeing with then is to describe the character as the story is unfolding, not to stop the story to describe the character, but as it's
Yeah, make it
unfolding
work
through
for
the
you.
chapters, you bring more detail, so the reader gets a more richer. And you know what? That's kind of organic how you're going to see things anyway. You're going to see things at first in a broad perspective, and then as you go further into the story, you're going to narrow that perspective, and you're going to want more detail.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to start off that way, but you can just give enough so a vague picture is formed, and then narrow that down as they go on.
Yeah.
And like chapter 18 in this book is my favorite chapter of all chapters, because I can the whole chapter is just about Joseph's emotion. This is after Christ is born, and it I still can feel it just by thinking about the chapter. But that's where I start talking about not his what he looks like, but trying to describe the emotion he's feeling because of the things he has, like unkept beard, bloodshot eyes, those types of things. But I'm not really explaining what he looks like. But if I did a better job in the beginning through the story, you would see exactly what I'm seeing in my mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hmm.
I think that's pretty good.
So I would really like to see other people's perspective of what they would think Joseph would look like, what type of character that you think he would be. In the beginning part of the book, I start talking about that he played such a crucial role in the upbringing of Jesus. We just don't know it. The records aren't there. But he would have been the one to teach him the scriptures. He would have been the one to teach him how to pray. He'd be the one that guided him in all of those things. So he played an incredible, important part. I wouldn't be surprised if, when we all know everything that happened, that some of the parables that Jesus used in his ministry were told to him by Joseph. I think he was that type of person, very wise.
Yeah.
So how to make sure that you see that part and also the physical part is extremely important. And I probably didn't enough take enough time to make sure the reader could see that. But that would make it all the better if they could see the picture that I'm seeing in my mind as I'm writing and trying to have the reader feel what I think the character is feeling.
You know, if you wanted to make, we already kind of figured out a way to make him seem, very detail oriented in the describing of things from his third person point of view. Um, but if you wanted to make him seem like that wise, future father figure, he has a lot of conversations with his best friend Amos.
Mm-hmm.
You could put some of that wisdom in there. Right now, you have him very much as a scared father to be, and he
Yeah.
has the huge challenge of raising God's son, and he's very overwhelmed by that. That is very present. But aside from that, that seems to be his whole character to me. He's the scared father to be who is trying to figure out the line between the law of Moses and what is happening. But in terms of the wise, um, person that he was, that you think he was, there isn't too much of that. He's very protective. He's very loyal. Um, but there's that wisdom. I don't quite remember it.
Yeah.
It has been a
So,
while since I've read it. I think it's
well,
been about a year since I read through
I,
it, but
I would have to agree with you. It's not shown a lot, especially at the beginning. I mean, he would have to do a lot of thinking, and I mean, you're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place of how do I. See, there's three things that you could do at that time in history as a Jew. If you're, I'll back up. You get betrothed, and at that point of betrothal, you call each other man and wife, but you don't go home together for a year. You have a year waiting period. Most of the time, that was to make sure that there wasn't an unintended pregnancy, either due to them, the couple, or a rape by a Roman soldier, which happened quite often. So you would have this 1 year waiting period before you could actually go home together and consummate the marriage. So there's three things you could do if something like a pregnancy happened. One is you could stone her, as was common. Um, Two was to shun her, divorce her. At that point, the child would be a bastard child. The woman would never be able to be a full Jew again, never be able to marry a Jew. The bastard child will never be able to marry a Jew. They would live in poverty their whole life. So I'm sure he's battling with that as well. As the third option was to forgive her, adopt the child, and raise him as your own. That was the third option. So him having the wisdom to go through all those different things and to come up with, this is what I have to do, whether he's conflicted with it or not.
well, it wasn't like he made a decision, but it wasn't the forgiver decision. He decided to. He was going to divorce her quietly, and then the angel was like, "Don't do that," and then he's like, "Okay."
Yeah, but I would think that that would be more forced from the family, not from him. I mean,
He
think
could have.
about it. If you're in love with someone and you find out something like this, you're crushed. But you're so in love, you can't see the forest for the trees. The father would come out and say, no, this isn't going to happen. You're going to divorce her. You're not going to put shame on our family. So there's, I think, a lot of pressure for him to do that. In the book, there's a big, strong scene of that happening where the father is the one that forces this to him finally breaking down and saying, fine, I'll divorce her.
I think that's another perspective that you take on this. There's a lot of you know people and films and stuff that take the side of this was an arranged marriage, and so Joseph and Mary weren't really um, like together. They weren't really. They didn't know each other much. Maybe Joseph was really looking forward to it, but possibly Mary wasn't, and things like that. Purely because of Mary's possible age. We don't know how young she was. It was possible that she was young
Well,
as
the average
betrothals were.
age of girls when they got married then was 16.
Yeah.
So we know that she was probably around that. We also know that she was very beautiful. She was very fair,
Yeah.
is how she's described. Um, and so I'm sure there would be a lot of other men trying to get her hand as well and court her
In
and
a small
everything.
town. She's a
Yeah.
small town beauty.
Yeah. And so for Joseph to finally get betrothed and then this happened, I mean, it it's devastating. And
Yeah.
what is he going to do? And all the things, thoughts is going to go through his mind of what to do, how to make this right, how to make it better, how to stay in love with her and not go through two of those other two.
Yeah. But what I was saying was, you take the perspective of, these weren't two people kind of thrown at each other and they made it work. It was two people who were in love and who loved each other, and then this happens to them.
Yeah, and so in the book, I have Joseph finding out that Mary's pregnant, and he can't find her. He even wants to talk to her.
Because she's gone up to Elizabeth's.
Yeah, and she's already gone. He doesn't know that, so he's trying desperately to find her, to talk to her, find out what's happening. And so he goes to his parents' his home and tries to talk to them, and it finds out that a person brought a letter from Mary to them for Joseph to read. And he goes out and he reads this note, and his fears kind of come true, because she doesn't say that she wasn't pregnant, but she doesn't say it wasn't happening either. And she says a lot of stuff is happening, and I have left. I'm going to Hebron to my cousin, which in fact was a 7 to 10 day journey. It wasn't, hey, I'm just going to go down the road a couple hours and go to my cousin's house. I mean, it was a long thing, and you usually don't just take up and leave on that. You have to go travel with a caravan. Otherwise, if you travel alone, there's too many thieves along the road and stuff. You probably just get robbed and killed. So you travel with a caravan with Roman soldiers and other people to be protected. So she probably was able to join up with the caravan very quickly. But that being said, the emotion that Joseph is going through right now is he's just torn, and then the pressure his father puts on him to divorce her. You have all of that. Then you have the dream.
Yeah.
Then you have
Where
this
he tells
dream
him,
where the angel
don't be
says,
afraid to marry her.
yeah, she is going to have the Messiah. You need to marry her. Now, there's two schools of thought with Joseph's character. He could at that point said, you know what, it probably be better if I did divorce her, because I am not worthy. I don't feel adequate to be the earthly father to God's son. I it's a too daunting of a task. I can't do it. Or I I don't want that to be our family. I want it to be us and her. This this thing is too big.
Yeah.
And so in the book, I have this dream taking all night, not just a quick, hey, it's okay, you can marry her, don't be afraid to. Because the next morning he has to go to his dad and say, sorry, I'm not going to divorce her. The marriage is on. And what is he going to say? You have gone mad. Oh, no, it's okay, Dad. I had a dream.
Yeah. I had a dream. I swear, an angel spoke to me. I should marry her.
Yeah,
Really?
It's gonna be funny. She's carrying the Messiah. Oh,
She's carrying the Son of God. Oh, wow.
Son,
That's convincing. Makes perfect sense.
So can you see how interesting this character can be? And so maybe I've gotten too drawn into all the conflict and emotion that I failed to show you what Joseph looks like. Because if you could see him, you'd be more apt to be able to see.
I mean, the conflict and emotion that you focus on is not bad. It's great. Like, when I was reading it, I really wanted to read more. I just wish that there was more to read. I just wish that the chapters were longer. I wish there was more something like in the first scene, chapter 1, when he's walking through the street and he's conflicted and wondering what to do. the image I got for him, because there's nothing, it's just Joseph. It's all the name was given. I imagined a 30, 40-year-old with like brown vestments, a little belt around his waist as they had, and like a red and white head covering, the type that would be bound around the forehead, and
Like a cap hood.
yeah, like a cap.
Yeah.
Dark hair, not too much of a beard, but I imagine him with like a scruff. Um,
It's not too
and
far
then
away how I
and imagined
pictured
him
but
a little thicker. I didn't imagine him being too lean, but
and
that is just the image I got when I was reading, and nothing else was provided for me.
and I took the road that he was younger. There are some people believe that Joseph was old, maybe had a prior marriage and either a widow. I mean that type of old. But I didn't take that. I took the road that he was young. I would say probably mid 20s, mid to late 20s. I think that was kind of a common age. So I took more commonalities than um, what people think. Some people think that Joseph was older. So yeah, that age, you might have more than a scruff or a beard. Um, but I don't. I'd have to look more into it. But I would think the fuller the beard, the more prominent the character, the more prominent the man would be in town.
The bigger the beard, the bigger the stature.
That's kind of what I would think.
Big beard, big man.
Yeah, I don't know. But
Big
he's trying to.
dwarves.
I mean, and this could be Joseph growing into his character too, starting out with the scruff, um, not really understanding what his
Yeah,
role is
but
going
by
to be.
the end, from all their running around and stuff, he could have a beard.
Yeah,
He starts with like a scruff, and then by the end it's grown up. Because it's what, weeks go by before he's on top of the hill with the sword or whatever.
oh yeah,
It's weeks before that,
oh and
right?
months after
Because
that
that's right before,
he's born.
right, that's right before Christ is
So
born.
9 months, at least 9 months, 8 to 9 months.
Yeah, so the start of the story. I mean, that could like be a visual progression, a visual sign of like progression.
Yeah,
It starts with scruff, um, and then it grows into a beard, and he's a man or something.
well, he's becoming more wise and more confident and more sure.
Yeah, that could be a visual. I mean, like a lot of writers with when they write women, when the women are like, all right, it's time to muscle up and go to war, whatever, they'll have them like cut their hair. And the same thing in movies also. They'll have long hair, but then when something happens to them that's very fundamental, a lot of times in media I see them cutting their hair short, and it's like the old me is dead kind of thing. Even when it's
Yeah,
like, no, you looked way prettier with long hair. Okay, I really liked you with the long hair better, but sure, if you
you need
gotta cut your hair,
you
okay.
need a stark change to.
Yeah, it could be something like that of the beard growing, and it can show.
Yeah.
Like it's a thing around.
So it basically wanted to be a love story, but you have a lot of conflict. And then what's really cool about the story, I mean, I love the way the story
You really
just
are
came
the
about.
biggest fan of your own
Yeah,
stories.
well, of course. But how, I mean, there's the relationships between a Roman captain and a centurion, and then King Herod and his spies, and
Yeah,
the
so
betrayal, and
the characters that Sean includes in this story is not just Joseph, Mary, and people they meet. There's also, I think there's what, three Roman soldiers in different
yeah,
positions that you write chapters on, and from their perspective, that have
I need to
nothing
describe.
nothing directly to do with Mary and Joseph, but just indirectly.
Yeah,
They're around the same area. What the captain does ends up showing up in the Joseph and Mary chapters, and it's really cool.
Yeah, so all these characters do converge. I mean, they're there for a reason. They're part of the story, um, and the way they interact and how they come their stories get woven together, and it's such just a cool thing of all the things that were happening around the time that Jesus was born, and then the fact that after he was born, after they went through all of that, it's still not over.
Yeah, and this is like one of the biggest critiques I gave Sean when I after I finished it was, he finishes where everyone else finishes with the nativity story. Jesus is born. There's the killing of the 2-year old and younger babies that King Herod sent out the order to do that, and they flee into Egypt, and that's where a lot of people end. But I told him, like, hold on, you have these Roman soldiers who's like you've half tied up their story, and you have them, Mary and Joseph going into Egypt with a newborn, or 2-year old or whatever. Like, there's a lot you can keep going. You don't need to stop where everyone else stops. Like, I want to see more. I want to see these guys chase, that one courier dude who hates Joseph. I want to see him, you know, follow him in on drunken revenge. Or, sorry, drunken revenge. I don't know, but I gave you the huge list of possibilities with those characters involving them in Egypt.
Yeah,
But
and I still remember the problem that I ran into. The reason I stopped there was I'm starting to have to describe Christ.
while he's growing up, and
That to
that's
me was seemed he's I mean he is such a huge part of people's lives spiritually, emotionally, and for me to start describing what his life was, I can understand making up fictional stories about Joseph, but Christ, that to me is almost one of those untouchable things. You just don't make up fictional stories
that's very
about
true.
Christ.
That is something to be safeguarded about.
And we know nothing about when they were in Egypt, how long they were in Egypt. We just were told that an angel would tell him when it's time to come back. But
Well, we know it was at least, saying that he was 2 years old when King Herod sent that order, because if he knew that that Christ was just born, he wouldn't have sent a thing to kill all 2-year-olds and under.
right,
So he was, let's say he was at max 2 when that happened, and we know that he was in the temple back in Jerusalem at 12.
12 years old.
So there's at least 10 years of Egypt, or at least I guess at max. At max, there's 10 years in Egypt, and so there is a lot. His growing up years to
Well, I
talk
guess we could
about.
look and find out when King Herod died, because that's really when it was going to be safe for him to come
Well,
back.
King Herod, as far as I know, what confuses a lot of people is because Herod is talked about in the New Testament. In like Jesus is 30,
Yeah.
8 years old. It talks about Herod, but Herod is kind of like the Caesar. Like Caesar kind of it gets passed down. King Herod, I believe,
King Herod the Great, I think,
yeah,
was the one.
the one that sent out the order. I believe he dies. I don't remember, but I know that um, there's something in the New Testament. I haven't reviewed that part in a while, but yeah, I know there's a part where he dies. I think his son kills him. I don't remember.
I have to look into that as well. But that's an interesting character. King Herod was very, very interesting. Now, he wasn't a true king. He was more like a puppet king.
Yeah,
Rome controlled him as he controlled the Jews. They allowed him to call himself king because the Jews wanted a leader, and so they said, "Okay, you can have this king, but the power really lies in Rome, and we're going to tell you, King Herod, what you can and cannot do," which he allowed to happen so he could have all this power and money and wealth and everything.
Yeah.
So, but he was drunk with this power. He had his sons killed because they were becoming popular, and he was afraid that people might like them more than they liked him. So he had their sons killed.
Who kills their sons? Like it's just because they get, yeah, he's
He
when
didn't
you're that
want
obsessed with power.
anything to assert his authority and power. Um, so it's a very interesting character. But what does he look like? What does the Roman soldier, what does the Roman centurion look like? In my mind, I see exactly what they look like.
The centurion, I imagine him with very dark, almost black, very short cropped hair. Um, I guess I imagine all of the Romans like that you give. Although I imagine the courier to be blonde with green eyes, and the guy who's under the centurion that doesn't like him. I imagine him just being like brown.
Captain. He's captain. So the way that I picture the centurion, um, I mean, he's gone through battles and wars. Um, his face is kind of leathered. He's very chiseled as far as his facial features. Um, he always usually has a few days of hair growth because um, he I don't know if he doesn't have time or he's too busy doing other things to make sure that he's clean shaven. Since he's a little bit older, I have a little bit of gray highlights that I
Oh,
think,
I've never imagined him as being very old.
yeah. And so that's kind of how I picture him. I picture him basically always in some type of Roman uniform.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it is good to think of and maybe describe a character in like a an outfit that they're gonna be in a lot,
mm,
just to keep it consistent. I mean, the mind is gonna focus a lot on the face, and what people wear is gonna be very much background. If someone's in armor or if they're wearing their day clothes, but I think describing just a typical normal day outfit is fine, just to keep a uniform image throughout the story, unless things
yeah.
have to change. Like if I don't think this happens in the story, but if Joseph was to don armor, I don't think that ever happens.
No.
But if he was to put it on, then you know. Either way, you were saying?
Yes. So I mean, he doesn't understand this Jewish religion, and to be a centurion in Galilee was, I mean, it's cool to be a centurion, but Galilee, that's kind of the back borders and these backwards people, and really not the very um, grandeur of being a centurion closer to Rome. So you're out in Galilee with not a lot of extra support, so there's a lot of kind of lawlessness going on. And with the centurion, he's not. I mean, he wants to be an honorable Roman soldier, but he also doesn't understand this backward ways of the Jews. So I imagine him saying stuff like when he's in battling with the Jews and they're saying, "My God is going to kill you," and he's going to say, "Maybe, but not today," as he kills another Jew for being, breaking the law or something.
Maybe, but I have like 10 gods on my side,
Yeah,
so
they had 21. The
yeah,
Romans had 21 gods. So they're like, why would you put all your breadcrumbs in the basket of one god when I have 21 I can choose from? So they didn't really understand why this one god religion existed with these backwards people that did all these weird things, killing animals and blood sacrifices. Just seemed really barbaric and odd to them. But to the Jews, this is what they've been doing for centuries.
yeah,
Maybe not centuries, hundreds of years.
it was sacred to them.
Yeah.
Um, and one thing that someone pointed out to me a little while ago was um, what was it? I think Pentecost, when like everybody's going to the cities and stuff for a celebration. Like all the sacrifices that they had to do to feed all the people, because the people, after the sacrifice, they would eat, the burnt offering. They would basically cook it on the offering, but then the people would eat it as a token and stuff. Um, and it was pointed out to me that the amount of animals that they would have to slaughter on the altars of the temple was so much that the roads would literally run red with the blood just flowing out of the temple. It would literally just flow down the streets.
And you have to understand, blood for the Jews was an everyday thing. It wasn't, oh my goodness, there's blood. Blood was just something they lived with. That's part of their sacrifices. When they came out of Egypt,
you could say blood is part of their religion.
Yeah, I mean they put the blood of a lamb on the doorposts, and when they were in Egypt, so the death angel would pass them by. I mean, so blood was a holy thing, not a, oh my goodness, a kind of a gross.
Except for some parts of the Mosaic Law where blood was to be shunned, but
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, the details of the Law of Moses. You know, don't be afraid to dig your hands into blood of a lamb, but other dead animals, don't touch those. Like, wait, hold on, what?
You got a different hoof. I'm sorry, you can't touch that.
Yeah, it's so much. All this, the details.
It really spelled out. But back then, the Israelites needed that structure. They needed everything spelled out for them to follow. They were so used to being that way in Egypt, being told exactly what to do, when to do it. So when they didn't have that structure, they're like, we don't really know what to do. So God said, okay, we're going to give you some structure then. This is what we're going to do.
Yeah. But we're getting off topic.
Yeah.
Describing characters.
So what do you think King Herod would look like? What in your mind, what do you think he'd look like?
I think he has I mean, I don't know what you think of when I say light scruff. I mean, like, he has good facial hair, but it's not to the point of maybe a small beard. If he does have a beard, I imagine it being like braided. I imagine him having mostly dark hair with a little bit of gray strands going through it. Possibly a large gray streak. I imagine him having very dark eyes.
And see, to me, he was a very physical character, strong. I mean, he had sizable arm strength and things, but he wasn't like ripped.
Yeah, you can have people that are strong that aren't ripped,
but he was also very, very cunning. King Herod was very good at manipulating and figuring out how to get things to go his way. And I do that in a chapter when they're talking about an uprising with the Jews and how he's going to put them down without even going to battle. We're going to do away with this whole thing, and we're not even going to risk anyone's life. Very, very cunning and smart on how to manipulate people's lives and situations. So I put that in, but at the same time, I don't describe how Joseph is very wise and smart.
Yeah, Joseph seems very much this underdog. I can't do anything except be loyal, and that is all I can do.
Well, no, I do put in, but it's later. So there's this part where the Roman centurion and his captain and armies come to Joseph's father's home to collect taxes. That was what they're doing.
Right.
And Joseph was very wise in how he handled that situation. But I need to, I mean, at that point you're thinking, wow, he's just this character, and all of a sudden, wow, that was really smart. I need to get them others.
If someone is smart once, they'll be smart again. If someone's wise once, they'll be wise again.
Yeah. So I need to show that early on that he's got those types of characteristics. So when this scene happens, they go, yeah, that follows his character, not, holy cow,
like, what?
He pulled that out?
Yeah. Wow, good job, Joseph. All right. Let's try to do that again later when you're in another bind.
Yeah, hopefully something will happen. So, I need to describe more what Joseph looks like, what King Herod looks like, the centurion, all those characters. So you can see what I'm seeing now. To me, Amos, I mean, just Joseph's best friend. I see him as being shorter. He's a son of a politician, so he has more finer fashionable clothes, more colorful clothes. But he's kind of awkward as far as he doesn't know how to integrate with the poorer people. He can be Joseph's friend and everything, but he's still kind of awkward in those types of social arrangements where it's like, oh, you're that type of people. I'm just gonna hang out with Joseph over here. So I picture him black hair, short, um, mostly clean shaven. I don't really picture him with a beard. Um, Younger.
I imagine him wearing like blue. I'm not sure why. I imagine him just always wearing blue,
Yeah.
light blues and dark blues, for some reason. That's like all I could really pin down about him when I was reading.
Hmm.
Just he wore blue.
And I was seeing him wearing like black and purple.
Yeah, these are if you described him wearing black and purple among the people who normally just wear like drab, just the poorer
Earthly
class,
colors.
earthly colors, that would say so much. Just that.
Yeah.
That says so much that he wore black and purple. Purple especially.
Yeah. Purple,
Purple.
was a very rich color.
You had to get blue and red and although down near the Mediterranean, I came across information that around the Mediterranean purple wasn't as hard because of actually special plants and stuff growing around Israel and this trade that was happening.
Ah.
But purple, still royal color. It's still harder to get than reds or blues alone.
So yes. So a very important person that I didn't describe whatsoever was Mary.
You described her hair?
When she was right before they were going to get married.
Yeah,
the take-home ceremony.
In the marriage ceremony, you described her hair and her eyes, and that was it. And one thing that I want to touch on later, maybe another podcast or not, but describing scenes or settings. You never describe a setting. Aside from this place is this, the palace, Joseph's home, that's about it. And I'm left to this very small scope that I create in my head, and I have to populate it, and for the most part it's fine. It's just sometimes I'm like, wait, I don't know where they are. I don't know how to envision this. Is Joseph's home dirty? Is there a lot of sand in it? Because for some reason, when Amos comes to talk to Joseph, and Joseph confronts him later on in the story, for some reason I imagined Joseph's house being just right next to this giant hill of sand. And I don't know why, but everything was just sandy. And so it was really hard to kind of figure out how things were happening. Because at one point I was like, just throw sand in his face. Oh, wait, I have no idea if they're on sand. Okay.
Now, see, I imagined his workshop, everything else in his home being tidy. His workshop, he was a creative person. Creative people don't have tidy workspaces. They're messy.
They put things down and they remember them.
And they're very creative, but they're not, okay, these are the places where my tools go. I'm going to put them back very methodically. It's not like that. So his wood shop wasn't just pristine. It was not really cleaned up, but he could make some really cool stuff. And the reader shouldn't worry about, wow, he was kind of unorganized in his wood shop, because there's some really cool stuff. And there's a lot of people, he was successful in his carpentry business. A lot of people wanted him to build their furniture. I would imagine that the higher ups and political figures and stuff would come to him to make their wood craft things, and either chairs or tables or other things out of wood.
Yeah, I don't think many people appreciate trades and crafts. in the turn of the era BC through the middle. It was only kind of recently where pursuing a trade seemed low. Like now everyone just wants business, to run the next business, to do that. But, before the internet, running a trade, being a cobbler who works on shoes, or being a carpenter, or being a leather worker, or being a smith,
Plumber,
or a plumber, like
contractor, builder.
electrician,
Yeah.
like those trades were sought after. I mean, they're still sought after. It's just people don't look for them now. People don't try to be them because there's no
That's right.
glory in it.
To
There's
be an apprentice was a big deal.
Yeah, you're going after a trade, and like this trade will feed you and your family
Yeah.
until you die. Like this is, and it was normally something you loved. So you
Yeah.
didn't go into being a master fisherman if you hated fishing. Like you didn't do that.
Or man, that fish really stinks. I hate that smell.
Or man, I really hate getting all these splinters in my fingers and all these cuts. I don't want to do woodworking. Like no, I mean nobody enjoys those, but the people who can take those along with creating something out of the grain and how the curvature of the wood and to make it beautiful, those are the people who went after those jobs and never worked a day in their life because
Yeah.
they just created and crafted, and they made a fine living out of it. They may not have had the wealth that businessmen nowadays do
And see,
or
I
equivalent of, but
that part of Joseph's character, I believe, comes out in his creativeness. I kind of look at myself as more of a creative person, and sometimes 2 plus 2 feels like it should equal 5, but I know it equals 4. But what if? What if it equaled 5 today? So those types of thoughts, what if? What if we could do this? What if we didn't look at all the norms? What if we just looked at something totally different, coming from a whole different direction? So him looking at a piece of wood and seeing what a normal person couldn't see, he could see, wow, that would make an awesome crown, or that would be a huge, cool tabletop. Where other people would look at it and say, that's an old, knotted piece of wood. So he was very creative. He could see things that others just didn't see. He could see what things could be. And I think that's an important part of a character that was going to raise the son of God, could see what potential this person could have and what their life would be like.
yeah, yeah.
So a lot of things to go into a character besides just describing them that you have to balance.
Going back to them going to Egypt, one thing you could do is, I mean, like, they're not out of the thick of the woods yet going into Egypt. A lot of things could follow, and you could still have the most of everything happen when Christ is still a child, and then leave out all those defining Christ, moments that are kind of scary to touch on. You could leave those to just time passing.
That's true.
You could have everything resolved when Christ is still 3 and 4 years old.
I've had some people tell me that this really needs to have a sequel, and so I need to come up with what happens next.
I think you don't. I don't think you should make a sequel. I think you just should add on to the book. I think you should just because most people are so done. They reach Egypt and they're like, oh, that's the end of the
Well,
Nativity. But it'd be so cool to be like, wait, I flipped the page and there's another chapter. Wait, it's still going, and
so I mean, to get to the point where Joseph dies,
oh yeah,
the book kicks up where Joseph hears about Mary, goes through his whole life, and he dies. How does he die? How does that work? Where does that leave Christ? Where does that leave Mary? What what was their life like then, and what type of turmoil is going to happen if that happened? There is some really cool stories that could all work, and I've thought of how this could work. The characters that are developed in the story could continue, and it could develop into this climax at the end of Joseph's life, really making it a man whose name was Joseph complete. That would be another I would say 10 to 15 chapters.
Probably, yeah. And I would enjoy it. I know I would.
Well, maybe I got some more work to do on that story. I think every author says, I don't know if it's good enough. At some point, you have to say, it's good enough. But always look at it as, I could do better.
I can describe this better. I can say this better. I can use this instead of using very. I
Yeah,
could use. I can say something else.
I
Instead of
hate using the word very.
very pretty, very much, very. Instead of using those, just use a thesaurus.
Yes, something to.
And sometimes
He was
thesaurus is.
very, very mad.
Sometimes I use a thesaurus to name things. Like in one of my this D&D campaign I've been making, I was like, I want this snake people empire. Like it's the snake people, and so I was like, what would be cool to name this? I looked up a thesaurus and looked through like snake and other words for that, and I found Ophidian, or some I don't remember what the exact word, but I ended up calling it the Ophidian Empire. I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
But the root word of that means snake, and it's just snake people. But you call it Ophidian, and it's like oof.
Yeah.
Like, so thesaurus. Thesauruses are amazing. Look at that. Reading.
And don't be afraid to ask advice on how can I make this be described better? How can I get this emotion to the reader and show it to them so they can see it, they can feel it. Obviously, I said this before in other podcasts, the whole goal of any author is to get the reader to forget that they're reading.
Oh yeah.
So they just get engulfed in the story and they're living it. That's what we want.
Yeah, I love the times when I'm reading and I forget that I've turned the page 4 times.
Yeah.
Like it's just a natural movement, and you don't even. But there are the times when you like something is worded weirdly, or a character does something that's odd, and you're holding the book. And you're like, that's odd, and
you're back out of the story.
yeah, you think about it for a second, and you're like, okay, and then 9 times out of 10, you start reading and you go right back in.
Yeah. Anyway, I hope I don't have anything else to discuss about this.
I don't think so. I don't have anything.
Thank you for joining us on this journey of character description. And I hope this helped you. I hope you enjoyed listening to us, and